Welcome back, everybody, to the New Tube for another session here on the internet. This is the way we spend our days these days, zooming from place to place, talking to each other virtually over the airwaves. Well, maybe not the airwaves, through fibers of glass spanning the country and the globe. Today, we're going to be talking about two wines from Red Newt Cellars, both Viridescens, our Meritage style blend, the one from 2007 and 2008. And today we have a special guest. We have Dominick from Albany who's going to be joining us. And Dominick, why don't you give just a short introduction of who you are and what you do and how things are going?
Dominick Purnomo from Yono's restaurant and DP in American Brasserie in Albany, New York. I am a longtime supporter of not only the Finger Lakes, but of course of Red Newt. I was a brief cellar rat intern on the crush pad this past harvest, which was certainly one of the highlights of my year. Learned a lot in that one day. I'm a board member of the New York State Restaurant Association. I actually just last week became a board member of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. When the pandemic began, as I closed my restaurants, temporarily, we converted our restaurants to community kitchens where, as of next week, we'll probably cross the 100,000 meal mark for those in need and at risk in our community. So I've been grateful to donations from people through the community and some corporate partnerships and grants that have helped us raise probably about $150,000 so far to help put this together. But I will say I've been spending most of my time, unloading trucks and cooking food and packaging it and loading it out. And this is one of the few times that I've got to sit down and talk wine. So I'm a little nervous. I'm a little rusty. It's been a few months, but
like riding a bike.
Excited to be here with one of my favorite wineries in all of the world. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. The best way to deal with rustiness is with a little lubrication, of course. How about lubrication of the 2008 Viridescens variety? Mm. Mm. Wow, that's really beautiful.
It's beautiful.
I say this, these tastings have been great because we've been dipping into the cellar, into the library for these tastings. And gosh, I don't think I've had a 2008 Viridescens in years. And it's tasting really nice. Now, so this is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. And I'm cheating by reading the back of the bottle here to make sure I'm correct. About 49% Cab Sauvignon, 47% Cab Franc, and 4% Merlot. And undoubtedly mostly from Glacier Ridge Vineyards. But so what do we think of this wine?
I really seem to there seems to be a lot of restraint to the wine. I'm trying to think back to 08, but that seemed to be a little bit of a cooler year.
Compared to 07, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it just seems to have a lot of restraint, a lot of balance to it.
So many of the 08 reds, and this has come up a couple of times, I think, over the last 2 months. But the 08 reds, I think, at the moment or at the time, were overlooked because they were coming on the heels of this big, intense 2007 vintage that kind of felt like, anything was possible for reds. But the 2008 actually, there's that restraint, there's an elegance to them, there's like a poise and acidity, right? Like there's a freshness to them that is really beautiful and is really, especially over the long haul, is really served to them well. Kind of keeps them a little bit more primary focused and really enjoyable with food and just on their own.
I remember when we were tasting the 08 in the tasting room, which would have been 6 years ago, thereabouts, if it maybe helps me remember, maybe about 6 years ago. And having, just finished selling out of the 2007, which was this really big year, and it was clearly a wine that was going to be cellared for quite a while. Some of our regular red wine drinkers came in and were just like, I'm not sure about this 08, So we told them, buy it, cellar it. And we've had several of our wine club members reach out to say that they've really enjoyed having access to some of the older reds, in particular some of the 08s, because with some encouragement from Kelby and some other posts that they've been reading, they've really fallen in love with this 08 vintage, especially right now, which is really kind of nice. because we're looking at something that's been in the bottle for about 10 years now. So
Yeah. And these two wines are, are roughly the same or very similar blend composition. And in 2007, 2008, I think the winemaking was pretty darn similar. I mean, of course, there would have been responses to the vintage and conditions, but the overall spectrum and sort of approach to winemaking was very similar. So this is really a great opportunity to kind of look at the soul of each of those vintages and see how they compare. Just tons of this dark berry, sort of blackberry or, dark black raspberry kind of fruit in the nose.
There seems to be like a stewed plum and prune that I get to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's still carrying that really kind of typical for us Glacier Ridge smoky quality to it as well, which is it's just like a nice underlying kind of note that goes through it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm blown away that after 12 years, just how fresh this wine is, it still seems like it has so much more time to go, which I think dispels a lot of the myth of perhaps cold climate reds and how long that they can age and where their line is. Because if you blinded me on this, I would not think this is a 12-year-old wine. So I think because it just retains so much of that acidity and that freshness, I think really speaks to the importance of cool climate regions. As we come back down off the hill of trying to get 100 points and mega purple everything to death and all of that. Like what lasts? What is sustainable? What is something that can sort of be time in a bottle? And this is a perfect expression of that style of wine that I think we want, which is going to age well and still, I would love to have the current vintage side by side with this, just to see, to see how far it really has come. But this is really, really showing beautifully right now.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, maybe Kelby, you can share some of your perspectives from your time at Yolumba in terms of sort of the weight and the grandness of the wine, sort of as a counterpoint to wines that are fruit driven and elegant.
Yeah, I mean, Yolumba, I had the fortune of working as the night shift winemaker in their red cellar, in the premium red cellar, which was just eye opening. And Yolumba, I mean, they're an old company, family owned, old school, and I feel like there's actually, I mean, the size is vastly different, but we have a lot of similar ethos, I would say. And Yolumba never really went down the like big Aussie red pathway that became, a caricature at some point. And one of their top wines, at least internally, was called FDR, right? Which means something very different to all of us, but to them meant fine dry red. And it was this idea of making this, I don't know if you maybe Bordeaux inspired, but very elegant, structured red wine that was meant for the long haul. And, especially in the Barossa, right? Something that was a little bit more acid forward, which is a real rarity there, and something that they would have to work on keenly. But yeah, as Dominick said, it's something that we can do in the Finger Lakes, just naturally being a cool climate. I'm always, I think we've had an interesting time finding our place in the wine world with these reds because we're in the US, so people want to compare us to California or Washington. And that it's not I don't want to say it's an unfair comparison, but I don't feel that it's not really, it's a comparison, but it's not because we're similar, might be the way to put it. And I'm not exactly sure where I would lean more old world with this exactly, or maybe something like Hawke's Bay in New Zealand, but like there's, a poise to these wines that's, really a marker of cool climate that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that final sip of the 08 makes me want to have a sip of this 07.
And as we're getting into these, this next wine, I mean, these two vintages really were night and day as far as the growing season went. That one was the hot and dry, and the 08 was much, much cooler with a little bit of rain. So I think we'll find some striking differences between these two.
Yeah. I mean, at the outset, that really vibrant fruit nose is much more restrained, kind of complex in the '07. Much sort of softer, broader, but less nice tension on the palate. You know, as Meg said, they're very different because they're only a year apart. There's only 1 year difference in bottle age, 1 year out of 12 versus 13 or whatever. So it's really cool to see how the vintage expression differs.
What I'm appreciating in this '07 compared to, I would say maybe when you tried it, or other similar '07s from us in the last couple of years, they were at kind of a point between primary and secondary, and sometimes could be a little bit gangly and awkward in that bridge, because the primary was turning more into like a darker stewed style, but you didn't really have the secondary savory characteristics kicking in. Whereas this '07 now is kind of like there's a lot of that nice like tobacco and leather that really is what I don't want to say I'd look forward in an aged wine, because the '08's a delight, but you know, this is kind of clearly entering a nice new plateau for itself.
How much of these wines were made? Is this a small production, Dave?
Well, there's not a lot left of these, just a few cases. The overall production of these wines was in that, you know, sort of 80 to 120 case size, just a few barrels, or maybe even smaller.
Okay. But you still have some on hand of both these vintages.
Oh, yes. Both on the website. And
6 bottles free shipping.
that's 6 bottles free shipping. And these days, you know, we've spent a lot of years sort of stocking the library for another day. But these days, you know, I think a lot of people feel like we better just drink it up. So everything is available for everybody to enjoy.
These are the days that we were saving them for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Not the zombie apocalypse. This.
You have to drink it before the zombies actually come.
Off a little 2020, not 2012.
Yeah.
I mean, they seem, it's just mind-boggling that this is, you know, similar cepage and, you know, same vineyard sources, but just two completely different wines. You know, just goes to show how, you know, how sensitive, you know, the vines are to, you know, to the weather. And obviously being a much warmer year in '07, you know, this tends to be, as we talked about, you know, how elegant the, you know, the '08 was, where '07 definitely seems to be a little more powerful, you know, certainly, you know, a little bit more expressive, you know, not quite as, you know, it's a little more powerful versus being elegant. You know, sometimes we talk about the power lifter versus the yogi, you know, when it comes to someone. This seems to be a good, you know, the two different vintages being, you know, two different styles holistically.
Yeah, I'm liking that the '07 is still really showing a little bit more of its tannic structure, which makes sense for the warmer vintage. I'm also, as I'm tasting them kind of side by side here, noticing I'm really starting to see the differences in the blend composition as well. The '07, I see a lot more of those kind of dark bramble fruits that I would associate with like Cab Franc and Cab Sav. And then the '08, I see a lot more of the Merlot influence with a little bit of that kind of menthol note showing through. And I'm really liking how those individual components are kind of working.
And Dave, in terms of, you were using Canton barrels for '07 and '08. We know that from previous conversations.
Mhm.
But what was the barrel time philosophy for these two vintages?
Well, for
Dust that off.
both of these would have been through the sort of the normal thing of that era of a few decades with red wines. Would have been fermented in 1-ton lots, punched down by hand. Pretty warm fermentation up front, lots of cap management, and then followed by tapering off both the management and the temperature through the fermentation, and then pressed off in our basket press, which holds about a ton, somewhere around the time when they stop fermenting. Not a lot of post-fermentation maceration, and then straight into barrel. And there would have been a mix of newer and older barrels in these. and quite often, and then the Viridescens is the final blend is made simply by going through and selecting individual barrels and assembling a blend. And I would say that one might think, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact data on what kind of barrels went into each one of these. But one of the parameters that we look at when we're blending, and one that we taste when we're blending, is the impact of oak. And when we have more, might seem counterintuitive, but in a year like 07, where it's much riper and richer and more tannin, we actually, you think, well, bigger, bolder oak is the right pairing, but often it goes the other way. When there's that much coming from the vineyard, sometimes you kind of taper back on the amount of impact you get from new oak. So I bet that 07 Viridescens was mostly second or third use barrels, a little bit older and no more neutral, and probably 08 had a little bit more newer oak as part of the blend. And I think that comes across in the nose and in the composition of the wine even today.
Yeah, there's definitely I know there's like a style with Viridescens where in some ways the more explosive components actually end up in a single vineyard varietal bottling. I feel like, not that it's always intentional, but I feel like the Cab Franc from Glacier Ridge or the Merlot from Glacier Ridge tend to be like really dynamic and punchy. And the barrels that show a little bit more of that restraint end up in Viridescens. Is a usual blending rule of thumb.
Okay.
Well, cool. That's a really fun set of wines. Get yours today. So I have a fair amount of wine here for just me and Susan to have with dinner, and I'm quite pleased with that. I've been preparing all day to not work anymore and sit down and drink wine and have a nice dinner. So that's what's gonna happen. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to have. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Broken record again, because I'm going to light a fire. Today it'll be probably chicken. I think we have some chicken breasts in the refrigerator, and there's going to be a little bit of a dark rub, a little bit of I'm not going to say a blackened, but along those lines, kind of a sort of a little bit spicy dark rub on the chicken, and it's going to go on the grill and be cooked off, a little bit of crispy crusty on the outside. And I think it's going to go into some kind of home pressed tortillas and a little bit of taco idea going on here. We have some mushrooms and roasted red peppers, and that's maybe it sounds a little bit pedestrian for these wines, but I think it's going to be delicious.
That's gonna be good.
How about you, Megs?
Yeah, so I am only in charge of part of dinner tonight, which is always a treat. My significant other has been marinating some pork loin and oregano and like some spices. And I think I'm probably going to get charged with grilling that up. And I think I actually might try and make a red wine, oregano, kind of maybe even cumin reduction to go over top those pork loins.
That's great.
Yeah. How about you, Rebecca?
Well, I've got a pork belly in the oven right now. Slow roasting. It's from Seven Bridges Farm in Lima, and I rubbed it with some 5-star spice from the Chinese 5-star spice, and I think I'm gonna slice it and put it into kind of an Asian soup. I've got some pho broth, and I've got some bok choy, and some mushrooms, and that's what I was kind of thinking. But definitely the pork belly.
How about you, Heather?
Well, I found some ground lamb from my cousin's farm, Bronco Farms, out in the eastern part of New York. And I also found the last 1 pound thing of ground venison. So we're gonna do lamb venison burgers tonight. And I have my secret Russian spices. It's called shashliki. And so it's a little bit of a lighter style than the ajik that I had talked about before. So we're gonna put that right into the mix with the ground lamb and venison. We're gonna grill those up with a little bit of pepper that we're going to sort of roast and kind of char right on the grill. It's a Weber, it's not one of the fancy ones. And then I have some Cuba Blue. I have some lettuce from the garden. Tomatoes aren't on yet, but I still have a nice little stash. So we're gonna do venison lamb burgers with a little bit of spice and some condiments. And I have a really nice light rice pilaf to go with that.
Yeah. So when I grill, work at the grill, I usually have to have a cold beer. But I'm wondering if you're spicing things with these Russian spices, does that involve icy cold vodka?
Never use flames and vodka together. It never ends well.
Okay.
Take it from someone who has a lot of practice. Never mix the vodka with the flame. That's for later. Even when we're doing outdoor cooking in Russia, we would save the vodka for after dinner, and we would focus on beer and wine during the grilling process. And then once all of the open flame handling is done, the vodka comes out.
Well, that's good to know. How about you, Donna? What do you have planned for this evening?
I am, in preparation for this, I started marinating a lamb, leg of lamb, and I have it in some North African spices, like sort of like a harissa blend, and some garlic, and it's been marinating all afternoon, I should say, and that's probably going to hit the grill in about another hour and a half, and then going to sear it nice on the outside, and then finish it off in the oven. And then do some crispy roasted potatoes and some grilled peppers, and I think it's gonna be perfect with this wine.
That sounds delicious.
That's kind of jealous now.
How about you, Kelby? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, I'm on the lamb train as well. It must have been a wavelength today. So I've got some loin chops, and kind of in honor of one of our favorite restaurants in Rome that is reopened and is doing takeout, Armando El Pantheon. They do a beautiful job with, it's a Roman preparation called scotadito, which means basically take it as fast as you can because it's so hot off the grill. And I've tinkered around with the recipe for a few years trying to replicate how they do it. And I've settled on a cast iron pan on top of the Weber grill. To get the requisite heat, but also the right amount of crispiness on the fat, which is the real key. So that will be, we'll do that and desperately keep from cooking anything inside given the heat.
Are we sponsored by Weber Grill? Because I also have a Weber Grill. Just throwing it out.
We can work on this. It was like
I thought I was just old-fashioned, outdated, and unwilling to evolve with big fancy grills with smokers. Give me my charcoal Weber any day.
I don't have a Weber, so if we are going to be sponsored by them, I would take one. And then
I was thinking about this the other day as I look out on our back deck and I see our Weber Grill. It was a gift to me from my wife and my parents and my in-laws for my 30th birthday, and in 2 weeks will be my 40th birthday. So it has stood the test of time. Still looks as new as ever. So a good investment. Bless.
Built to last.
Happy early birthday.
Yes.
yeah.
Happy birthday. And everybody, thanks for joining us. And until next time, cheers.
Cheers.